Hey everybody, it's Carpo here with your weekly racehorse update. Wait a minute. How seriously do I have to take myself here? Sometimes I sit down and I talk about very serious things. Other times it's just a bunch of bullshit from the top of my mind, and today it will be somewhere in between. With what's going on in the world right now, I'm not going to get into the details of what countries are suffering, what ailments, or what problems we might face in the future. We all know what's coming, right? So let's sit back and have a, well, for me, Jägermeister. This is not brought to you by Jägermeister, and in fact, probably shouldn't even bring it up. But I wanted to say that a couple drinks in the evening helps me cope with what's going on right now. I say that because I was reading an article earlier about what they consider essential operations with stores, and it really widely varies on places. In Italy, they have a totally different, they have wine stores have to be open, and certain, food shops and whatnot. Out here, it's gun stores in America, but also liquor stores. Apparently the grocery stores were selling out of liquor in some states, so they reopened liquor stores as essential. And I live in Washington State, and, we've deemed marijuana stores or cannabis shops a mandatory thing. And people might say that's because of, there's multiple reasons. For one, we have people who take it for medical reasons, and for another, it's a huge tax gain for our state, right? Why lose that money? But for all of us who can actually afford to go out and, say, buy a bottle, that wasn't intended. I have a hi-hat cymbal sitting right over my it's sitting right over my computer here. Sometimes I just kind of go smack, and I bumped it with the Jaeger bottle. So there we are. Anyway, go ahead and make fun of me, I don't care. I'm at this point where right now I've kind of let go of certain parts of my demeanor, certain parts of what I'm willing to accept about myself. Because I've come out here into my office and I've been thinking for a while about how I'm going to pursue this video, and then I end up not doing it. And I'll tell you something, over the last while, sometimes I have a hard time talking about certain subjects. Maybe I have a few drinks, maybe it just gets late in general, I get tired, then I can't speak anymore. And by that time I'm like, damn it, I want to talk about something, but I don't want to come across as a drunk or a stoner. But, I am a stoner. I'm not a drunk, but I am a stoner. And at this point in time, things are unique. So, what did I want to talk about, and what is my point, right? I wanted to talk about the less fortunate right now. Doctors and nurses are among the less fortunate right now. Now I understand they took upon a job, just like police did, to protect people, to take care of people, protect and serve for police. But for doctors and nurses, they took their own oath to do no harm, to try to help people. There are people who are being called out of school before they even have their doctorate to help with this crisis. And can you imagine being 17, 18, 19 years old and being, we need your help to save all these lives of people who are literally dying. In Italy, the cases rose beyond 10,000 over the last couple days. 890 or something around there in the last day or so, or the day and a half. There is an exponential curve in Italy, and their cases have risen dramatically. And people say, well, why is it so bad in Italy? Well, because they're old, because the testing hasn't been done. What I'm trying to get across here is that this is coming for all of us, and we're kind of in the, not the calm before the storm, but the eye of the storm right now almost. It's like, maybe not the eye yet. I would say this summer might be the eye. We're going to go through some hardcore shit right now. And for you and I, if you're watching this video, it means you have the internet, right? If you have the internet, it means that you can probably afford to pay for your internet and your food. And I'm guessing that most of you are in some sort of a shelter. Maybe I have some homeless friends, like Roberta, who's on the road, but you're heading to Phoenix. That's a different story. I just brought that up because I was trying to think of people who are traveling, and I do have a couple of subscribers who don't have a home necessarily, but what's going on right now with a lot of people staying at home is there are a lot of people who don't have homes that are suffering on the streets, a lot of homeless people who are suffering, but also a lot of people who do have homes, who do have shelters and food, but cannot handle being home with one another. And child abuse is on the rise. And I'm one of those guys who, I really have an issue with CSD coming to people's houses and telling them how to raise their kids. I'm not saying that people should not should not punish their kids, and I'm not one of those people who doesn't think that parents should know what's best. But I also know there's a lot of abusive parents out there. And apparently in one county in Texas last week, and this is disgusting to me, 7 children under 4 years old in a week were brought in to a medical center with child abuse and blunt force trauma to the head and body. 2 of them died. 2 kids under 4 in one county from child abuse, just because kids are home a little longer with their parents right now. Maybe their parents don't have a job, maybe they're frustrated and scared. There's absolutely no excuse for that. And I know that's kind of turning the subject into something pretty negative, but it's important because not only are there abusive cases, but some people really don't have enough food right now. The food banks, it's one of those times where I will round up my cash in the store and give them a little extra, because, I don't know, I see a lot of people wanting to help their neighbors, and there are a lot of folks who aren't going to make rent and bills. If you think this is bad right now, can you imagine how it's going to be in April? What about May or June, when people haven't been working for over a month or 2 months? My wife and I'm grateful. My wife is a server. She makes pretty good money. And over the years, I haven't made a lot of money, but I've saved everything I made. I drive a cheap car, $1,000 car. I bought a school bus for a few grand that we remodeled instead of buying like a cabin or an RV. And I feel like my wife and I have been pretty wise about what we've spent our money on. Doesn't mean we haven't been stupid, but the point being here that we have a little bit of extra to get us through for a few months. But if the shit really hits the fan and it gets bad, we might lose our house like anybody else. And that's why we bought a school bus. And that's why we've been looking into tiny homes and land for such a long time here. It's expensive, but I would really like to get away, get off the grid. I live in the suburbs in a way, kind of, in a neighborhood, but not maybe 10 miles from the city, right? So I'm not right in the city, and thank God for that. And I'm also 10 miles from the woods if I want to go that way. So there's a lot of flexibility in travel. I feel really bad for people who live in the middle of New York right now, who are quite literally being told they can't travel. Apparently the military or the National Guard is going door to door in some neighborhoods in Rhode Island, I believe, in some of the areas where New Yorkers can, where they have their second homes or rental homes, and actually telling them they have to quarantine for 14 days. It's a scary time for Americans. It's a scary time for people around the world. So if you think it's bad here, imagine how bad it is everywhere else too. It's not a political conspiracy. There are still people, it's just facepalm that I even have to say that, but up until a few days ago, and probably even to this day, I guarantee there was at least one newscast tonight where somebody was talking about how the Democrats are blowing this out of proportion to try to impeach Trump or something. It's not about politics. This is fucking people up. New York, the hospitals are completely overwhelmed right now. When Cuomo asked for more ventilators in New York for this crisis, Trump laughed and said basically, he's just asking for what he doesn't need. Here we have a complete... I'm not going to go into that. You all know how I feel about Trump, but it's not an issue of us versus them. It's an issue of give people everything they need right now. Everything they need. And as I've said before, it becomes pretty absurd. But I bought this book, actually, I just got it in the mail today. David Quammen, it's called Spillover. Animal Infections and the Next Human Pandemic. And then down below it says, Timely and Terrifying by Dwight Garner, New York Times. It's a decent-sized book. It was written in 2012. And it's talking about the next great pandemic, which we're in right now. And I think I might have seen somebody mention it on Joe Rogan or another show. So I ordered it, and now I'm going to read it. I've only got about 30 pages in, but it's pretty good. I like it. As I read in the description, kind of tells like a detective novel, if you will. So, I know that the last week or so, I haven't done a lot of videos, but the ones I do are usually late at night, and I've been I kind of ramble, maybe slur my speech a little bit. Times have been rough, people. You all understand that. I'm going to be brutally honest, it's, I'm not interested in the usual subjects that I've dealt with because I'm dealing with a lot of people dying and being sick, as well as protecting my own children. I've talked to people who are like, oh, it's so hard for me to deal with this. I'm like, imagine you live alone or have no relatives. Imagine having a wife, 3 kids, and a mom, and a brother, and all the other relatives I have and friends that I'm afraid. My wife's mom, mother-in-law, who's going to get sick, who might die. My wife's mom is like 80 years old. That's getting up there, you got to be careful. So, but she's strong. My mom's strong, and I think that most people will survive it. Hell, there was some 102-year-old lady who survived it. But there was also an infant that died, and perhaps a 17-year-old kid. You just never know what kind of conditions you might have. So for the people who want to downplay this virus and say, well, it's not a big deal, it's really important to realize that you might be one of the ones who it is a big deal for. So, I don't know how bad my immune system is. I've had side pains over the years. The last thing I'd like to do is get a virus like this and die within a few days, and leave my family behind. And I think the rest of you feel the same way, so we can beat this shit, right? We can beat it together, for what it's worth. That's about all I got. Take care, my friends. Talk to you soon.